The Bible, a Human AI Retelling. Release date, April 25, 2023. In a groundbreaking new release, the world of artificial intelligence has been taken to new heights, as the Bible is brought to life by a powerful human AI. The video, aptly titled, "The Bible, a Human AI Retelling," offers a vivid and compelling retelling of the most influential religious text in history. Produced by Dennis Brooks, this project uniquely combines cutting-edge technology and deep understanding of the sacred text to deliver a fresh, immersive experience that will appeal to a diverse audience. This ambitious project aims to deepen the understanding of the Bible and foster a sense of connection with its timeless teachings. The video features a seamless narration of the Bible's stories, from Genesis to Revelation, by the human AI narrator, who provides a clear and engaging retelling of the text. This advanced AI has been trained using the latest language models, enabling it to deliver an accurate, coherent, and emotionally resonant narrative. What sets this project apart is the integration of stunning AI-generated visuals that accompany the narration. Each scene, character, and location from the Bible has been meticulously generated using advanced artificial intelligence, resulting in a series of breathtaking images that bring the stories to life. These visuals not only add depth and dimension to the narrative, but they also allow viewers to immerse themselves in the biblical world, experiencing the events as if they were there. One of the key accomplishments of the Bible, a Human AI Retelling, is its ability to bridge the gap between the ancient text and modern audiences. By leveraging the power of AI to create a vivid and relatable portrayal of the Bible, the project makes the text accessible to individuals from all walks of life, irrespective of their religious background or familiarity with the Bible. Furthermore, the creator of this video has ensured that it remains true to the original text. Rigorous research and consultation with religious scholars and theologians have been undertaken to guarantee that the AI's retelling maintains the integrity and accuracy of the sacred text. The Bible, a Human AI Retelling, is a testament to the transformative potential of artificial intelligence in the realm of storytelling and education. This video not only offers a fresh perspective on the Bible but also showcases the limitless possibilities for AI to enrich our understanding of history, culture, and spirituality. The Bible, a Human AI Retelling, promises to be an unforgettable experience for viewers, leaving them with a newfound appreciation for the power of technology and the enduring wisdom of the Bible. And now for the beginning of The Bible, a Human AI Retelling. The Bible, a Human AI Retelling. The Book of Genesis. Chapters 1 through 50. What does the Book of Genesis mean? The first two chapters of the Book of Genesis in the Bible describe the creation of the world and the first humans, Adam and Eve. The creation story in chapter 1 describes God creating the world and all living things in 6 days, with the seventh day being a day of rest. In chapter 2, the story describes God creating the first man, Adam, from dust and the first woman, Eve, from Adam's rib. It also describes the Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve lived before they disobeyed God and were banished from the garden. These chapters are considered by many to be a religious explanation of the origin of the world and humanity, and are often interpreted as allegorical or symbolic rather than literal. Genesis chapter 3 is known as the Fall of Man, and describes the story of Adam and Eve disobeying God by eating from the forbidden tree of knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden. As a result, they are banished from the garden and are cursed with the difficulties of life, work, and death. The chapter also records the first sin, the first murder, and the first judgment. Chapter 4 continues with the story of Adam and Eve's descendants. It tells the story of Cain, their first son, who becomes jealous of his brother Abel and kills him. This event marks the first murder in human history. The chapter also tells the story of Cain's descendants, including Lamech, who is the first person recorded in the Bible to have multiple wives. This chapter is considered by many as a continuation of the consequences of the fall of man, in which the first sin is followed by the first murder and the beginning of civilization. Chapter 5 is a genealogy or lineage chapter, which lists the descendants of Adam through his son Seth. It lists the names of the person, their age at the time of the birth of their son, and their total lifespan. This chapter is significant because it is the first time in the Bible that a genealogy is given. It shows the continuity of the human race from Adam to Noah, and it lays the foundation for the future history of the world, as well as the line of the promised seed, Christ, that will come through Seth's descendants. Chapter 6 is a continuation of the genealogy theme, and it introduces the sons of God, marrying the daughters of men, and having children called the Nephilim, which were giant men of renown. This passage is much debated among scholars, with various interpretations including a possible intermarriage between God's angelic beings and human women, or a reference to godly men marrying ungodly women. This chapter also introduces the story of the flood which God sends to wipe out the earth because of the wickedness of humanity. Chapter 7 describes the flood that God sends to destroy the earth because of the wickedness of humanity. God instructs Noah, a righteous man, to build an ark to save himself and his family, as well as representatives of all the animals on earth. The flood lasts for 40 days and 40 nights, and all other life on earth is destroyed. Chapter 8 picks up after the flood has ended, with the ark coming to rest on the top of a mountain. Noah sends out a dove to see if the waters have receded, and the dove returns with an olive leaf, indicating that the flood is over. God then makes a covenant with Noah, promising never to send another flood to destroy the earth. He also establishes the rainbow as a symbol of this covenant. The chapter concludes with the genealogy of Noah's sons. Genesis chapter 9 describes the blessings that God gives to Noah and his sons after the flood. God establishes the covenant with them and promises to never again destroy the earth with a flood. He also gives them the commandment to be fruitful and multiply, and gives them permission to eat meat, but not with the blood still in it. God also establishes the principle of capital punishment for murder. Chapter 10 gives a genealogy of Noah's sons and their descendants, known as the Table of Nations. It describes the descendants of Japheth, Ham, and Shem, and how they populated the earth. It also lists the different nations and territories that they settled in. This chapter is considered as an important source of information on the ancient world and the origin of different peoples and cultures. Chapter 11 tells the story of the Tower of Babel, in which the people of the earth came together to build a tower that reached to the heavens. They sought to make a name for themselves and to prevent being scattered across the earth. God, however, confused their languages and scattered them across the earth, thus causing the formation of different nations and languages. Chapter 12 tells the story of God's call to Abram, later known as Abraham, to leave his home and go to a new land that God would show him. God promises to make Abram into a great nation and to bless those who bless him and curse those who curse him. Abram obeys and becomes the father of the Israelite nation. Genesis chapter 13 describes the conflict between Abram's herdsmen and Lot's herdsmen over the use of the land, leading to Lot's separation from Abram and his move to the plain of Jordan. Abraham, on the other hand, remained in the land of Canaan, which God had promised to give him. Chapter 14 tells the story of a battle between several kings in which Lot, who had settled in the plain of Jordan, was captured. Abram, upon hearing of Lot's capture, gathers his allies and successfully rescues Lot and other captives. After the battle, Abram meets with Melchizedek, the king of Salem, who blesses Abram and gives him 1/10 of the spoils. Genesis chapter 15 describes God's covenant with Abram, in which God promises to give him and his descendants the land of Canaan, and to make him the father of many nations. God also tells Abram that his descendants will be enslaved for 400 years, but will eventually return to the land as a great nation. Chapter 16 tells the story of Sarai, Abram's wife, who was unable to have children. Sarai, in her frustration, allows her slave Hagar to bear Abram a child, Ishmael. However, this leads to tension between Hagar and Sarai, and God reassures Abram that his descendants will come through Sarai, who is renamed Sarah. God also promises that Ishmael will be the father of 12 princes and will become a great nation. Genesis chapter 17 describes the renewal of the covenant between God and Abram, in which God changes Abram's name to Abraham and Sarai's name to Sarah, and reiterates the promise of descendants and land to Abraham. God also institutes the rite of circumcision as a sign of the covenant between God and Abraham's descendants. Chapter 18 tells the story of the visit of three angels to Abraham and Sarah, who are told that Sarah will give birth to a son, Isaac, despite her advanced age. The angels also inform Abraham that God will destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah because of their wickedness. Abraham pleads with God to spare the cities if there are righteous people living there, and God agrees to spare the cities if 10 righteous people can be found. Genesis chapter 19 tells the story of the angels visiting the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, where they are met by Lot, who offers them hospitality. The men of the city demand that Lot turn over the angels so that they can be raped. Lot refuses, and instead offers his own daughters to the men of the city. The angels then strike the men of the city with blindness and tell Lot and his family to flee the city before God destroys it. The chapter ends with the destruction of the cities by fire and brimstone. Chapter 20 tells the story of Abraham moving to Gerar and pretending that Sarah is his sister, so that the king of Gerar, Abimelech, will not kill him to take Sarah as his wife. God intervenes and tells Abimelech in a dream that Sarah is actually Abraham's wife, and Abimelech returns Sarah to Abraham and apologizes for his actions. Abraham then leaves Gerar and goes to Beersheba, where God affirms the covenant with him and promises him many descendants. Chapter 21 tells the story of the birth of Isaac, the son of promise, to Sarah, as God had promised. It also tells the story of the expulsion of Ishmael and his mother Hagar from Abraham's household, at the request of Sarah. However, God promises to make Ishmael into a great nation as well. Chapter 22 tells the story of the binding of Isaac, or Akedah, in which God commanded Abraham to offer Isaac as a burnt offering on a mountain. Abraham obediently sets out to do so, but at the last moment, an angel of the Lord stops him and provides a ram to sacrifice instead. The chapter emphasizes the obedience and faith of Abraham as he was willing to sacrifice his son at God's command, and God affirms his covenant with Abraham and promises to bless him and his descendants. This chapter is considered as one of the most significant and important in the Bible, as it sets the foundation for the belief in the ultimate sacrifice of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, in Christianity. Chapter 23 tells the story of the death of Sarah, the wife of Abraham, and the purchase of a burial site for her in the land of Canaan. Abraham negotiates with Ephron, the Hittite, for the purchase of a cave and field in the city of Machpelah, where he buries Sarah. This chapter also highlights Abraham's status as a resident alien in the land and his desire to secure a proper burial place for his wife. Chapter 24 tells the story of Abraham's servant, who is sent to find a wife for Isaac, Abraham's son. The servant is directed by God to go to the city of Nahor in Mesopotamia, where he finds Rebekah, who is related to Abraham, and brings her back to Isaac. The chapter highlights the importance of God's guidance in finding a wife for Isaac, and the fulfillment of God's promise to make Abraham the father of many nations. This chapter is also significant for the fact that it sets the stage for the story of Jacob and his descendants in the following chapters. Genesis chapter 25 tells the story of the birth of Esau and Jacob, the twin sons of Isaac and Rebekah, and the familial conflict between them. Esau was born first and was a skilled hunter, while Jacob was born second and was more of a homebody. Esau sells his birthright, the right to be the firstborn and the inheritor of the family's blessings, to Jacob for a bowl of stew. Chapter 26 tells the story of Isaac living in the land of Gerar during a famine. Like his father Abraham before him, Isaac pretends that his wife Rebekah is his sister, out of fear that the Philistines will kill him in order to take her as a wife. God intervenes and assures Isaac that he will be blessed and multiplies his flocks, and Isaac becomes very prosperous. The chapter also tells of Isaac's conflicts with the Philistines over water rights and how God blesses him. Furthermore, it sets the stage for the continuation of the story of Jacob and Esau in the following chapters. Genesis chapter 27 tells the story of Jacob, the son of Isaac and Rebekah, tricking his father into giving him the blessing intended for his older brother Esau. Jacob, with the help of his mother, disguises himself as Esau and presents himself to Isaac, who is blind and near death, and receives the blessing intended for the firstborn son. Esau, upon discovering what Jacob had done, is filled with anger and plans to kill Jacob. Rebekah, learning of Esau's plan, sends Jacob away to her brother Laban's house in Haran. Chapter 28 continues with Jacob's journey to Haran. Along the way, he has a vision of a ladder or stairway connecting heaven and earth with angels ascending and descending on it. God speaks to Jacob in the vision and confirms the covenant with him and his descendants, reiterating the promise of land and many descendants. Jacob then arrives in Haran, where he works for Laban for many years, marrying his 2 daughters Leah and Rachel, and having children with them and their maids. This chapter sets the stage for the story of Jacob and his descendants in the following chapters. Chapter 29 tells the story of Jacob's arrival to Haran and his meeting with Laban, his uncle. He meets Laban's younger daughter Rachel and agrees to work 7 years for her hand in marriage. After the 7 years, Laban tricks Jacob by giving him his older daughter Leah as his bride instead. Jacob, feeling tricked, agrees to work another 7 years for Rachel. Chapter 30 continues with Jacob's life with Laban. He becomes wealthy through breeding different color sheep and goats. He also has many children through his 2 wives Leah and Rachel, as well as their maids. However, Jacob becomes discontent with Laban's treatment of him and decides to return to his homeland with his family and flocks. Rachel and Leah, who have their own issues with Laban, agreed to leave with him. The chapter also tells of the birth of Jacob's son Joseph, who would play a significant role in the next chapters of Genesis. Genesis chapter 31 tells the story of Jacob's decision to leave his father-in-law Laban's household and return to his homeland. Rachel and Leah, who are unhappy with their father's treatment of Jacob, agreed to leave with him. However, before they depart, Rachel steals her father's household gods. Laban pursues Jacob, but God speaks to Laban in a dream and tells him to not harm Jacob. Laban and Jacob make a covenant and part ways peacefully. Chapter 32 continues with Jacob's journey back to his homeland. Along the way, he learns that his brother Esau, whom he had tricked out of his birthright and blessings, is coming to meet him with a large company of men. Jacob is afraid of his brother's wrath and sends gifts ahead of him to appease him. He also prepares the worst by dividing his household into 2 camps. In case Esau attacks one camp, the other camp will escape. Jacob spends a night alone and wrestles with God, who changes his name from Jacob to Israel. The chapter also tells of the reunion between Jacob and Esau, which surprisingly turns out to be peaceful and the brothers reconcile. Chapter 33 tells the story of Jacob's reunion with his brother Esau. Jacob had sent gifts ahead of him in an attempt to appease Esau, and when they meet, Esau is gracious and accepts the gifts. Jacob and Esau reconcile, and Jacob continues on his journey to his homeland. Along the way, he chooses a location to settle and builds an altar to God, who had protected him throughout his journey. Chapter 34 tells the story of the tragic incident that happened to Jacob's daughter Dinah. Dinah, while visiting the women of the land, is raped by Shechem, the son of a local leader. Shechem then expresses his love for Dinah and asks his father to arrange for her to marry him. Jacob's sons, especially Simeon and Levi, are furious with Shechem's actions and deceitfully trick and massacre the men of the city, including Shechem, and revenge. Jacob is furious with his son's actions and fears for his family's safety as the surrounding cities seek revenge. This chapter also highlights the tension between the Israelites and the neighboring tribes. Genesis chapter 35 tells the story of God's command to Jacob to return to Bethel, the place where he had previously had a vision of a ladder connecting heaven and earth. Jacob obeys and God reaffirms the covenant with him and his descendants, promising him a numerous offspring and land. Jacob then purifies himself and his household by getting rid of the foreign gods that they had acquired during their stay with Laban. Rachel, Jacob's wife, dies during childbirth, and Jacob names the child Benoni, but his father changes it to Benjamin. Chapter 36 is a genealogy of Esau's descendants, also known as Edomites, who settled in the land of Seir, in the area of modern-day southern Jordan and northern Saudi Arabia. It lists the kings of Edom, which began with Esau himself and continued with his descendants. It also lists the descendants of Esau's other son, Eliphaz and Reuel, who had other lines of descendants. This chapter serves as a transition between the main narrative of Jacob and his descendants, which is the focus of the book of Genesis, and the history of the Edomites, who were also a significant tribe in the ancient Near East. Chapter 37 tells the story of Joseph, one of Jacob's 12 sons, and his rise to power in Egypt. The chapter begins with a description of Joseph's special relationship with his father and the jealousy of his brothers, which leads to them selling him into slavery in Egypt. In Egypt, Joseph is sold to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, and is falsely accused of a crime by Potiphar's wife. He is thrown into prison but is able to interpret the dreams of the cupbearer and the baker, which leads to his release and promotion to a high-ranking position in Pharaoh's court. Chapter 38 continues with a story that is not directly related to Joseph. The chapter tells of Judah, another of Jacob's sons, and his descendants. It describes how Judah marries a Canaanite woman named Shua and has 3 sons, Er, Onan, and Shelah. It also describes how Er marries Tamar, but is killed by God for his wickedness. Onan is commanded by Judah to marry Tamar and provide offspring for his deceased brother, but Onan refuses and is also killed by God. Tamar, who is left childless, disguises herself as a prostitute and sleeps with her father-in-law, Judah, and bears twin sons, Perez and Zerah. This passage is also known as the story of Tamar. It is a narrative that highlights the moral and ethical issues of the time and shows that God's promise is not dependent on human perfection but on the faith of the individual. Chapter 39 continues the story of Joseph in Egypt. It tells how Joseph is able to interpret the dreams of Pharaoh and is appointed as the ruler of Egypt, second only to Pharaoh himself. Joseph's brothers come to Egypt to buy grain during a famine and do not recognize him, but he recognizes them and tests their character. After they prove their repentance and loyalty to him, Joseph reveals his identity to them and forgives them for selling him into slavery. He also invites his father, Jacob, and the rest of his family to come live in Egypt, where they will be taken care of during the famine. Chapter 40 describes the story of 2 of Pharaoh's officials, the cupbearer and the baker, who are imprisoned for offending the Pharaoh. Both have dreams, and Joseph, who is also in prison, interprets them for them. The cupbearer's dream is interpreted as a positive sign for his release and return to his position, but the baker's dream is interpreted as a negative sign of his impending execution. The dreams come true as Joseph said, and the cupbearer, who had been released, forgets about Joseph and does not help him to regain his freedom. These 2 chapters show how Joseph, through his wisdom and ability to interpret dreams, rises to power in Egypt and how he uses his power to forgive and help his family. The story also illustrates how the promise of God was fulfilled through Joseph, who saved his family and many others during the famine, and how the cupbearer's forgetfulness contributed to Joseph's continuing confinement. Chapter 41 continues the story of Joseph in Egypt. It tells how Pharaoh has 2 dreams that no one in his court can interpret. The cupbearer, who had been released from prison and had his dreams interpreted by Joseph, remembers Joseph and tells Pharaoh about him. Joseph is brought before Pharaoh and interprets his dreams as a warning of a coming 7-year famine. Joseph advises Pharaoh to appoint a wise and trustworthy man to oversee the collection and storage of grain during the 7 years of abundance so that there will be enough to sustain the people during the famine. Impressed by Joseph's wisdom, Pharaoh appoints him as the ruler over Egypt, second only to himself, to carry out this plan. Chapter 42 describes the story of Joseph's brothers coming to Egypt to buy grain during the famine. They do not recognize Joseph, who has risen to power and is now ruler over Egypt, but he recognizes them and tests their character. He accuses them of being spies and puts them through a series of tests, ultimately demanding that they bring their youngest brother, Benjamin, back to Egypt with them. They return home to Jacob, their father, and tell him what happened to Jacob is hesitant to let Benjamin go, but ultimately agrees when he realizes that there is no other way to save his family from starvation. These 2 chapters show the fulfillment of Joseph's interpretation of Pharaoh's dreams and how Joseph's wisdom and foresight helped Egypt to survive the famine. It also shows how the promise of God was fulfilled through Joseph, who saved his family and many others during the famine. It also illustrates how Joseph's brothers' past actions and attitudes toward him, such as selling him as a slave and lying to their father, are being tested and how Joseph ultimately forgives them. In chapter 43, Joseph still does not reveal his identity to them, but instead tests their character by accusing them of being spies and demanding that they bring Benjamin with them to prove their innocence. They bring Benjamin and Joseph sets them up with a test. He secretly puts his silver cup in Benjamin's bag, and then accuses them of stealing it. The brothers are arrested and held responsible for the theft, but Judah, one of the brothers, offers himself as a slave in place of Benjamin in order to save their father from losing his last remaining son. Chapter 44 describes the continuation of the test. Joseph, who is still not revealing himself, offers to release all of the brothers except for Benjamin, but they refuse to leave without him. Judah pleads with Joseph to forgive them and to not hold the theft against them, and tells the story of their father's love for Benjamin, and how it would be devastating for him to lose his last remaining son. Joseph is moved by Judah's words and reveals himself to his brothers, telling them that he is their brother Joseph and that God has sent him ahead of them to Egypt to save lives. These 2 chapters show how Joseph continues to test his brothers' character, and how their past actions and attitudes toward him are being revealed and tested. It also illustrates the theme of repentance and forgiveness, as well as the power of a father's love for his children. It also shows how the promise of God was fulfilled through Joseph, who saved his family and many others during the famine, and how Joseph ultimately forgives his brothers for their past actions. Genesis chapter 45 continues the story of Joseph revealing himself to his brothers and telling them that he is their brother Joseph, and that God has sent him ahead of them to Egypt to save lives. He forgives his brothers for their past actions and assures them that they will be able to live in Egypt, and that he will provide for them and their families. He sends for his father, Jacob, and his family to come to Egypt, and Jacob and his family reunite with Joseph. Chapter 46 describes the story of Jacob and his family moving to Egypt. Jacob and his family, including his sons, daughters, and grandchildren, moved to Egypt to live with Joseph. The chapter lists the names of the descendants of Jacob who moved to Egypt, including the names of the 12 sons of Jacob, who would later become the 12 tribes of Israel. These 2 chapters show the promise of God was fulfilled through Joseph, who saved his family and many others during the famine, and how Joseph ultimately forgives his brothers for their past actions. It also illustrates the theme of reunion and forgiveness. It also describes how Jacob and his family moved to Egypt and how his descendants would become the 12 tribes of Israel. It also helps to set the stage for the Israelites' time in Egypt and the eventual story of Moses and the Israelites' liberation from Egypt. Chapters 47 and 48 describe the events that take place when Joseph, one of the 12 sons of Jacob, brings his family to Egypt during a famine. In chapter 47, Joseph, who is now a powerful official in Egypt, invites his father Jacob and his brothers to come and live in the land of Egypt. He gives them land to live on and provides them with food during the famine. In chapter 48, Jacob blesses Joseph's 2 sons Ephraim and Manasseh by adopting them as his own sons and giving them a share in the family's inheritance. He also blesses the rest of his sons and their descendants, foretelling that they will become a great nation and will be blessed with prosperity and land. These chapters can be seen as a continuation of the story of Joseph and his family, and also as a foreshadowing of the Israelites' future in Egypt, where they will eventually become enslaved before God delivers them out of Egypt, as seen in Exodus. Genesis chapter 49 and 50 contain Jacob's blessings and prophecies for his 12 sons and their descendants, known as the blessings of Jacob. In chapter 49, Jacob blesses each of his sons and gives them a prophecy about their future descendants. For example, he blesses Reuben, his firstborn, saying that he will be preeminent but also unstable and that his kingship will not endure. He also blesses Judah, saying that his descendants will be powerful rulers and that the Messiah will come from his line. In chapter 50, Jacob dies and is buried in the land of Canaan. Joseph, his son, makes a promise to his brothers that he will not take revenge on them for selling him into slavery, and they all reconcile. Joseph also makes the Israelites swear that they will not bury him in Egypt, but will take his body back to Canaan to be buried with his ancestors. The blessings of Jacob in these chapters gives insight into the story of Jacob's family and the future of the Israelite nation. They also serve as a reminder that God's promises and plans for the Israelites will be fulfilled despite the struggles and hardships they may face. End of the Book of Genesis.